some good things. Did everybody, you hear or see about Emily walking? It's amazing. You know, in college, Friday or Saturday. Mom's enrolled to college. Well, really God is good. So, did everybody get your phone call this morning about Dale?
Yes.
Everybody, let's give God. Everybody hear about this? We prayed to receive Jesus Sunday night, and wow, you talk about a lot of prayer. You talk about a lot of prayer for a long period of time by a lot of people. That ought to teach us that God is here. So continue to pray for him. God will continue to strengthen him and be better. Pray for Marcia Honeacre. She continues to improve and her therapy and so forth. Also pray for Thomas Harris's mom, Sandra. She fell, I didn't know this till yesterday morning, actually fell Saturday and broke her hip severely. And she had surgery Sunday morning. She's in Clinch Valley. They moved her yesterday to the rehab floor. She's in, the way I remember her room number is the spray cleaner, 409. I don't like about it, but it helps me remember it. I mean,
Which hospital was she in?
it could have been Heinz 57 or something. You know. But anyway, pray for her. She's got some extensive therapy. The hip ball completely broke out. But they, surprised me, not a hip replacement, they put it back together. Put plate and screws and all that stuff. So, remember her, Andy Clifton is having surgery on his hand, his arm in the morning. At Abington, he has to be there at 5:15. So, remember him, that's his surgery. Pray for our services Sunday, that God will have his way and bless and just give us another outpouring of the Spirit. Tomorrow is teenagers, 7:30 on the hill. So remember that. It's a good time, good fellowship. There's a lot of good things coming up in this fall. Late summer, fall. I am trying to work. Some of you mentioned homecoming. I am trying to work on a homecoming. There's so much stuff going on in October, and maybe what I'm looking at is the first or second Sunday of November. And I've been in contact with Sean White. He cannot come. He's all tied up with the church there and his school trips and everything. And he really regretted he was not going to be able to come. So remember him. So we're working on it. I hope to have everything settled on that real soon. So remember that. Remember our next month, real quickly, remember next month we're doing on the last 4 Sunday nights of September, we're doing the Grow tapes. Everybody will be together here. We're going to go through the Grow. We're going to watch the Grow tapes on Sunday nights to refresh ourselves about Grow, to share it with new people, know what it is, to reintroduce it, and then to form 4 new teams, 4 either new or reestablish or continuing teams, and then in October begin to function again. So appreciate that. Remember that. Of course, the lost. I think you'll agree with me. It's worth it all. Really, it's worth it all to go through all the times and months and then hear about somebody like Dale Fry getting saved. Yeah. That puts it all in perspective. I mean, really, the whole kit and caboodle, it really kind of focuses it all on what we're all about. So, how's Glenn, sister?
He's not doing really good. They're sending him to, we have to go next week to a neurology specialist. So one time a year, everybody keeps getting these UTI infections. And the next week, they're sending him to a spine specialist, and he has to have his second biopsy. Then we found out today.
Okay.
On the 23rd.
What kind of biopsy?
But he's really, the biopsy on the kidney, because that's the only way they can truly tell if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Okay.
But he's just in a lot of pain right now, a lot of pain, and these trips are rough on him.
He's still going every week. He's going every week back to still.
That's supposed to already stop if they can.
So they still have to go every week to Winston-Salem, so they have a lot of pain. Let's remember him tonight. He's still, sure it's a lot of struggle and concern for her, just a lot of things there. So remember, continue to pray for Glenn. And, do you have other concerns you would share with us? Oh yeah, good. I had I went back to the surgeon Monday, got a good report. No cancer or pre-cancer. So you need to pray for Patsy. She's just really, may have put up with it for a while, so anyway. But when you get mail that there's been a new bunch of insurance policies bought, it makes you, that's me. God is good. Others you want to share? How's Brenda?
She had a good day today, she had a treatment yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
He went far good.
Okay, that was your third one. One more treatment. So we'll continue to pray for her. God will just minister special grace and come from there. Okay, others?
Pray for Amanda, her daughter. She had to go to the leg. She's 7 months pregnant, and they said they think she's about to lose the baby. So they rushed her to Johnson City about a couple hours ago.
Wow.
So pray to remember her.
Oh, yes, okay.
Pastor, I have some concerns. Remember our little great nephew, he got a concussion yesterday, and he's only 6. And, of course, that's scary.
Oh, yes.
And remember all of the men and women that are in Charlottesville this weekend working. It's the first anniversary of the situation they had last year. So they have 700 state troopers from across the state that are
Wow.
working.
Wow.
And our daughter-in-law had a biopsy Friday. It came back yesterday, she has cervical cancer. So remember her, she has a CT scan in the morning.
Okay.
And then she and Chris will meet with the doctor on Wednesday. Pray for both of them.
Yes, let's remember Chris and her. That's really pleased for this family. Thank you, Judy, so much. All right, others?
Well, I went to the doctor today and, things are, I guess, pretty normal, but he's having a lot of problems.
Okay, let's remember him. Just, God will give him special grace also.
Hey, Pastor,
Yes.
I'd like to thank the good Lord, my sister had a catheterization yesterday. She was in church Sunday morning and started feeling pressure, and she went to the doctor, and they had told her that she'd had a heart attack. So she had a catheterization yesterday, and the doctor that did that said he didn't think she'd had a heart attack, nor, nothing wrong, so thank God for that.
Amen. Amen. Praise the Lord for that. Yeah. Amen. Yes. Let me mention one other, preacher friend in West Tennessee. His name is Edgar Pierce. I just found out today he's got extensive cancer in his liver and his lymph nodes and his bones. He's still pastoring. But pray for his wife, Joyce, and that church, that God will somehow just give them special grace also. So I appreciate that. Unspoken, you want to show it by the uplifted hands?
And our sister Ruth went to the doctor today. She has colitis,
Okay.
and she is very good, something else.
Wow, that sounds, yeah. Remember Ruth there. Okay, a lot of needs tonight. I'm so glad we have a God of mercy that we can come to, and God of grace, and as James says, He giveth more grace. Sometimes you and I are learning, we know that there are times you need more grace than you do others. But He's got it appropriately for when we need it, as we need it. And pray for the nominating committee. We met tonight. Pray for what God has for you to do in this coming year. Find your niche, find your place where God wants you to serve and how He wants you to serve. Pray for the service this Sunday. Let's pray for it to be a great harvest, and that we'll go into this new church year in the next few months, this fall, with great enthusiasm and intensity for the Lord, and see great things happen. Let's bow together, please, for our prayer tonight, and ask God to lead us. Jimmy, would you lead us?
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we love you, we praise you. And Lord, we thank you so much that we can always come to you with our sickness, with our problems.
Thank you, Lord.
And you're there for us, for healing hand.
Right.
And Lord, we pray you be with Wade tonight as he teaches. Give him the knowledge, the words that we need to hear. Bless each one that's been mentioned here tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
So Wade, come teach us tonight, and I know you appreciate him as I do. And let's just listen to the Word of God.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Nice crowd tonight. All right, we are in the 6th chapter of Esther. We started it, read the first few verses last week. All right. Just say a few words about last week first, to kind of bring us up to speed. Last week we talked about, actually we started last week in chapter 5, in chapter 5, some 6. Esther, after a 3-day fast, I'll say nervously, goes to the inner court of the palace to see the king. And she invites the king and Haman to a banquet she's prepared. And the king is open to granting her whatever request she may have. But Esther won't tell him what she wants. She instead invites him to another banquet the next day, he and Haman. And there she says she will make her request known. We saw where Haman is leaving that first banquet and he encounters Mordecai, the king's gate. And just seeing Mordecai fills him with rage. And he goes home and his wife and friends suggest that he approach the king about having Mordecai executed. Now that night, the king couldn't sleep. The king couldn't sleep, and he has a servant read to him of the records of his reign. And just before morning, the last section that is read to him is the section where Mordecai had reported a plot to kill the king. The king then realizes that Mordecai had never been rewarded. And they have just finished discussing Mordecai when Haman enters the palace. Now, last week we stopped at verse 5, but I'm going to go back to verse 4 and pick up there and read to the end of the chapter. All right, Esther chapter 6, verse 4 to the end of the chapter. It reads, "So the king said, 'Who is in the court?' Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, 'Haman is there, standing in the court.' And the king said, 'Let him come in.' So Haman came in, and the king asked him, 'What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor?' Now Haman thought in his heart, 'Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?' And Haman answered the king, 'For the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head. Then let this robe and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.' Then the king said to Haman, 'Hurry, take the robe and the horse as you have suggested, and do so for Mordecai the Jew who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken. So Haman took the robe and the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the city square, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Afterward, Mordecai went back to the king's gate. But Haman hurried to his house, mourning and with his head covered. When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet, which Esther had prepared. All right. As we pick up here, the king hears that someone has arrived in the palace. And he asks who it was, and they tell him that Haman has come into the palace. And the king orders that Haman be brought in. Now, Haman, at this point, do you think he's probably spent a good deal of time rehearsing what he wants to say to the king? Yeah, I think we were talking last week about all the characters here who probably had sleepless nights the night before. I would say Haman was one of those, and he thought over in his head several times exactly what he wanted to say to the king. Does Haman get to ask the king anything? He doesn't. He comes in, and before he can make a request of any kind to the king has something to ask him. And what does the king ask him? Okay?
How we should honor a man that has served him.
Yeah. It has come to his knowledge that someone has done something great for the king and they were never received any kind of reward. So what should he do to honor this man? The king wants to honor somebody. Do you think that once Haman hears that, he kind of starts swelling up with pride?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And he's thinking all along, it's certainly got to be me that the king wants to honor. You think he's a little bit blinded by his pride?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Would it ever occur to him that the king might want to honor anybody but him?
No.
No. No, he is, let's say, attended with the king the day before a banquet given by the queen. And he's going to be attending another later on that day. The king asked him this, what would he do to honor somebody? In his mind, do you think he's thinking, how would I like to be honored?
Yes.
I think that's fair to say. He's thinking of himself and picturing himself being honored by the king. And the idea he has would boost his already large ego. What did he suggest that they be allowed to wear and ride, this person? A king's robe and a horse that the king has ridden on. And he doesn't just want the king's horse, he wants the little crest of a thing that they would fix to the top of the horse's head. He wants to be sure that's on there too. So everybody knows it's royalty here. Now, why do you think Haman wanted to go to all that? Why did he want a robe and a king's horse? Yeah, that's for sure. Do you think he wanted to, maybe for a little while, feel what it's like to be king?
Right.
Oh, I think he did. I think in his mind he wanted to be king for just a little while. Now, What did Haman suggest be done after the honoree has been robed and set on a horse? That's not all there is to it. What's got to be done then for this person?
Then Haman has to go and get Mordecai and put it.
Before that, what does he want? He wants the robe and the horse. Then once they put the honoree on the horse, what are they going to do? Yeah, one of his noble princes should lead the horse through the city and declare that this is how the king honors those who please him. Now, what a surprise Haman's in for. Well, the king hears this suggestion. Does it sound like a good idea to him? Yeah, king's all for it. Yeah, go get the robe, get the horse, and then get who? Mordecai. Get Mordecai the Jew, the man sitting out there at the king's gate. Now, did Haman's heart sink just a little bit?
A little bit, I'd say.
We'd like to see the expression on Haman's face at that second.
Yeah,
That would have been everything.
it would. It would. All right, what a shock. The honored person is not Haman at all, but the one person that at that time he hated the most. The one man that he came there certain the king would allow him to execute. Now, not only is Mordecai the honoree, but who gets to lead the horse around? Haman does. Yes, the king said, that's a great idea, Haman. Get the robe, get the horse, put Mordecai on it, and you lead him around and make the proclamation. Now, Haman gets to proclaim to all that this man is being honored by the king. The man he was making preparations to kill, he instead gets to get him on a horse and lead him around the city. If Haman had known it was Mordecai, you think he would have come up with something else to honor the guy? Yeah, he would have. Do you think he's kind of feeling like a fool now? I think that's safe to say. He's feeling a little foolish about the whole thing, but does he do it? He did. He does go through with that. Now, how hard was that for Haman? Humiliating to do this. Now, wouldn't it be interesting to know what was said, if anything, or the expressions between Mordecai and Haman when Haman approaches him carrying this robe to put on? And then they bring out the horse. I put Mordecai on.
I wonder what Mordecai was thinking, Haman.
Yeah, yeah, for
He
sure.
sure had no respect for, Haman, none whatsoever.
Right. He did not. Yes. Now, does Mordecai accept the honor?
Yes.
He does. He doesn't say, no, Haman, this isn't necessary. He says, okay. He gets the robe and he gets on the horse and there they go. Does Haman honor Mordecai?
No, he'd have to be all for it. He wasn't. In his heart, he hated him. He didn't want to.
But did he do it?
He did.
So he did. So he did honor Mordecai. He does honor Mordecai. You know, why didn't Haman say, king? Or somebody else might be better suited for this than me.
Well, he knew better than that. He didn't get out for the sword right then.
Haman follows the king's command to honor Mordecai. Did Mordecai follow the king's command to honor Haman? He did.
Well, Mordecai wasn't supposed to honor Haman. That wasn't a command.
it was a command by the king to show honor to Haman. When he walked by, they were to bow.
Oh, gave him the honor of doing that.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. And, when Mordecai was commanded to give Haman a similar kind of honor, he refused. But when he is on the receiving end, he accepts it. In the case of both Haman and Mordecai, the king had commanded that honor be given to the one that he chose. Haman had given honor and Mordecai refused. Mordecai was willing to receive what he was not willing to give.
Right. Good.
Is Mordecai a hypocrite? Yeah. Yeah. He was. Mordecai was a hypocrite, but let's don't think too much of Haman because he did show honor to Mordecai. Is Haman's day going like he had planned it that morning? Not exactly. This has been a bad morning for him. He follows through and honors Mordecai, and once they get all that finished, where does he go? Goes home. He goes home, and I wonder as he's going, on the trip there, if he noticed the gallows or the pole that he had constructed to execute Mordecai on.
What did you?
I'm sure he looked up at it and
Yeah.
it was right at his house.
Yeah, that's right. It was right there at his house. He returns home. The day before, what kind of mood was he in when he came home? He was in a great mood. He'd just been to that first banquet. He comes home. He feels very honored that Esther had asked him to come to it, just he and the king. He's in great spirits. Now, of course, encountering Mordecai is in a little bit of a bad mood. But now, when he returns home, what kind of mood is he in? He's mourning. Interesting. The Bible says he's in mourning. He's grieving. He's humiliated. It's doom, despair, and agony on me. And where else on a Wednesday night will you get a reference to hee-haw? What's happened to this great plan to execute Mordecai? It's gone.
Gonna do with that gallows there, I wonder?
There's going to be a use for it. The plan that he had to get rid of Mordecai, it's all gone. So he goes home. And who does he tell of all that's happened to him that day? His wife and his friends. All those friends that he liked to gather in to tell him all the great things that had happened to him and boast about. He calls them in again, but this time he's got bad news. Do they have any words of encouragement for him? No. In fact, as they are thinking about the day's events, how did they interpret that? Yeah. Not only would he not see Mordecai dead, but Mordecai would triumph over him, is the way they looked at it. What was special about Mordecai that they thought that would happen? He's a Jew. Interesting. Well, what did his wife and his friends know about Jews? They weren't Jewish. What would they have known?
They've been around a long time because they captured them
Yeah.
and it was just dispersed all over the kingdom.
Right. They would have known some history of the Jews.
Right. Yes.
They would have known that at various times they had been tried to annihilate the Jews, various tribes had, and always failed. The Jews always either triumph or a remnant remained. They knew there was something special about the Jews. Now, it seems that they no more than said this to Haman. Now, what happened? Yeah, the limousine pulls up. Haman's got a party to go to, a banquet to go to. The king's servants arrive and they take him to the banquet. Do you think he's feeling like eating? I doubt it. Now, what had happened with Mordecai? What did he do after all he's going to the city? It tells us where he returned. In verse...
Return to get the king's gate.
Yeah, he went back to where he was before. Back to the king's gate. Now, you think Mordecai is in better spirits? He should be. He'd been grieving for several days now. And, you know, it's interesting, the Bible doesn't tell us that they ever tell Mordecai what's going on and why. It doesn't say that this is the way the king is rewarding you for the plot you exposed. We can assume, I guess, that they did, but we're not told that. Interesting. I wonder if he was maybe a little confused about everything that had gone on that day. Now, Mordecai. Yeah.
It might be that the only reason he agreed to do it was because there was someone had told him, when
Could
you
be.
earned this.
Yeah, it could be. Could very well be, yeah. All right. So Haman heads off to the banquet. Mordecai is there at the king's gate. For Haman and Mordecai, this day was starting out great for Haman. Mordecai was still in grief. And now we're here half a day later, and their situations are reversing. Haman's outlook is looking dim, and Mordecai is looking up. Now, let's look here at chapter 7. And let's go ahead and read the whole chapter. It reads, So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And on the second day at the banquet of wine, the king again said to Esther, What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Up to half the kingdom? Shall be done. Then Queen Esther answered and said, If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. So King Xerxes answered and said to Queen Esther, Who is he, and where is he, who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. So Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Then the king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther, pleading for his life. For he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, Will he also assault the queen while I am in the house? As the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Now Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, Look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath subsided. All right, as we begin there in chapter 7, where are we heading to? The bank. We want to go eat. Now, what kind of a disposition would you expect Haman to be in about this time?
I was trying to cover up his grief.
Yeah, I think he would have been very nervous, if not scared, if not apprehensive about what could happen here. Would he rather be somewhere else?
Yeah.
Yeah. Should he and his wife have just packed up their stuff real quickly and skipped town?
Yeah.
Well, it might have worked out better for him. We're told that they were drinking wine. Apparently the king remembers something. What comes back to the king?
It seemed to quite request.
Yeah, the queen's request. He had asked Esther the day before, and she had told him that she would make it known the next day. And here we are at the banquet, the second banquet. And he remembers that, and then the king even once again assures her that whatever she asks, she can have it, even up to half the kingdom. And he says that even before he knows what it is. Do you think the king thought she's going to make a big request or just something small?
Big.
Could have been. We're not really told what the king expected her to ask for.
I don't think that, the king thought that she would actually ask for half of his kingdom.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's why he offered.
Could be.
Good interesting she had.
Yeah, would have. Yeah. Now, it's interesting, Esther comes through with her request, and what does she ask for? Her life and the lives of her people. Now, up until now, the events of the morning, when Haman first came to the palace, do you think he felt like, when thinking about the decree, now the king had just given him his signet ring and not really inquired and made him second most powerful person in the empire, do you think that maybe he felt like he had the king in his pocket? Yeah, I think he probably did. I think that Haman probably came to the palace that morning thinking he'd be able to do pretty much what he wanted. Now, how might he have believed that Esther felt about him up to this point? How do you think he thought Esther looked at him?
Well, great favor, because you invited the second time.
Yeah. Yeah, she's invited him now to 2 banquets. Now, he left the first one feeling great about himself. Maybe he believed even Esther was a little bit on his side. I don't think he saw her as an enemy.
He didn't know she was a Jew.
That's right. He didn't know she was a Jew. Had he known, would he have only concentrated on killing Mordecai?
I don't think she would have followed doing that at all.
Think not?
Because
May
she
not.
was a Jew and she was the queen,
Right.
and the king was in her pocket.
Yeah.
And it was, and I always thought, well, I didn't always say, I didn't think I knew it, but Mordecai, you know, when, the king told, the men to go out and find the beautiful women in the country and to bring them in the hand of her, because the other one had shamed her and not doing nothing on her. And he chose Esther. Esther was a Jew. And so she was really upset that she was chosen. She told Mordecai. Mordecai said, you know, maybe it was maybe for this very reason, to save you people, that you are here at this time. Somehow like that.
Yeah. She was upset. She was reluctant to act on Mordecai's request to save the Jews. That's when she gets upset. She's willing to go to, she was perfectly willing to apparently, to enter this
Yeah.
contest and become.
Oh,
She'll be a queen.
so she was upset with Mordecai, because Mordecai said for her to go.
That's Elijah.
Asked-
Mordecai asked her to ask the king to,
I mean, before she was queen, after the first queen was killed,
yeah,
and then he got them to collect all the really beautiful
Right.
women in the kingdom, so he
Right.
would choose a queen who would please him the most.
right.
And, I don't know, I'll go back and do that,
Okay,
because I'm kind of confused,
yeah,
because I'm sure it doesn't sound like it.
all right. Let's go on here. Haman didn't know that Esther was a Jew. Now, when Haman's sitting there, and the king asks this of Esther, and she says, "Give me my life." Did the king see that one coming? No. He couldn't have foreseen that request. The decree to kill the Jews had been out for 4 or 5 days. The city, we are told, was in turmoil over it. But does the king know anything about that? We don't read that he's even aware that the people in the capital city are upset about this decree that Haman has issued.
Well, did he get, the king's permission to do that?
Yes, but he didn't specify what people he was talking about. He only told the king there was a rebellious people in the empire, and something should be done, and then the king allowed him to do that. The king didn't ask enough to know who Haman was talking about back before the decree was given. All right, Esther then tells the king that she and her people have been sold into death. Now that may be a reference to the bribe that Haman had initially offered the king to follow through with this. But she goes on to say, if they had been sold into slavery, that she would have remained quiet. But they had been sold into death. Now the king's been listening to Esther. Do you think his anger is building? Oh yeah. Is he ready to correct the situation? He's ready to try. And he wants to know who it is. Who would dare threaten the life of the queen? And Esther tells him, Haman. What must Haman have felt when he heard his name come off Esther's lips?
Not only Haman, but wicked Haman.
Yeah.
Who worked
Yeah.
the low life of the palace.
She doesn't just identify him by name. She goes on and refers to him as an adversary and an enemy, a wicked man. To the king, she is saying, Haman, who you thought was your friend and ally, the second in command, the person you gave all this power to, is indeed, in fact, your enemy, your adversary, a wicked man. You think Haman's wanting to kind of slide into the floor and disappear? Think so? Now the king is shocked and angry. We don't know how much wine they've had to drink. But we read that the king gets up and goes into the palace garden. Why did he do that? What do you think? To think.
The pace.
Yeah, to pace. Yeah, trying to process all that's just gone on. To let it all sink in. To see the error he had made trusting Haman. Also to clear his head, try to figure out what he had to do. Does Haman go with him?
Nope.
No, he doesn't. He stays behind. Why did he stay behind?
The bag.
Just beg Esther for his life. He saw the anger in the king's face. So he's gonna try to do something to get himself spared. Now, it's interesting to me that as we read this, we find that Esther isn't standing, she's reclining on a couch. And apparently has been reclining there the whole time.
Isn't that how they ate?
Yes, that's my understanding, that they did eat reclining on couches like that. Yeah? Now, we don't know if Haman had been drinking too much, or if he's just trying to beg Esther for his life. But he approaches her, and where does he end up? On her.
He trips, he was drunk.
He trips. He couldn't just fall on the floor. He falls on the couch on Esther. And then the king happens to return and sees him. Did he assume the worst? He did. Is there any hope for Haman now?
Don't seem like it, does it?
No. Now, apparently there were either attendants present in the room, or when the king returned from the garden, he had called some and they come with him. Because no sooner has the king spoken to Haman about assaulting his wife, then what did these attendants do?
Covered his face.
They covered his face. He is now a man that is doomed to be executed. Now, one of the attendants, maybe seeing that the king is considering what to do next, he tells the king about that gallows or pole that Haman's had constructed next to his house. What did the king say to do? To hang him up. So Haman dies inside of his home. And I wonder if his wife and all those friends that he get calling in to hear him brag were there to see. And so with Haman's death, the king's anger, we're told, subsides. Now, what can we take from the passages tonight, and what we looked at last week? Well, I think the book of Esther, especially with the events of the end of last week, the second part of what we looked at last week, and then tonight, we can learn that God's timing is perfect. From Esther's first banquet and Haman passing Mordecai when he left, to the king's sleepless night, and then reading the records of his reign, and then finishing that morning with learning of Mordecai and what he had done and never been rewarded, at the moment that Haman is walking into the palace, we can learn that God's timing, just as in our lives, is always perfect. We also learn about what a difference a day can make. One day Haman was the second most powerful person in the empire, and the next day he's stripped of his power and executed. We have no promise of what tomorrow holds. And we're also reminded of what we read in the 6th chapter of Galatians, that we should not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that shall he reap. All right, next week we will pick up in chapter 8 and talk about the deliverance of the Jews. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
I think we have a tendency to think, oh, everything is hunky-dory now. The problem hasn't been solved.
That's right. It has. Yep.
So there has to be legal channels done.
Yep.
But you get from this too that it's amazing the depth that say do not kill, the Bible says, and he said that whosoever angered his brother, you know, is in danger of judgment. Jesus knew that the deeper issue
Yeah.
of anger and all these things that, it's amazing the depth and the extremes that that hatred will take.
Yeah, that gets to when we did the study in First John. John writes, if you hate anybody, you don't know God, for God is love.
Exactly. Diametrically opposite. You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, nothing could stop him, but it's like how fast life can turn on a person like that. Yeah. You know, it's just like, and that's the way life is. You can make that point very well. But, wow, you can be king of the hill and you can be on the gallows in a little while.
That's right. You can? Yeah. All right, anybody else have anything? If not, then let's stand and we'll be dismissed. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, you've blessed us with another time to open our Bibles and read and discuss your word, Lord, and I thank you for that. And Lord, I thank you as we just talked, Lord, what we can learn from the book of Esther, that your timing is perfect, Lord. We may not always understand why things happen or the order of events, but you know exactly why. And your plan is perfect, Lord. May we understand that and accept that. And Lord, I also pray, just as we've talked, Lord, that what a difference a day can make, Lord. We don't know what tomorrow holds. Lord, may we, as your word tells us, rejoice in today and be glad. And Lord, may we also know, as we've talked here at the end, Lord, that we need to be careful what we sow, Lord, because in due time we reap as well. Lord, I just pray that you would help us, Lord, to strengthen us, Lord, that we might be better Christians, Lord, and better able to serve you. That others, Lord, might see you in our lives. Be with us now, I pray, as we depart from here. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.